In Kano village, if you ever wanted to see poverty wearing human skin, you only needed to look at Musa. He was in his early 50s, yet his frame looked like that of a man who had carried burdens far heavier than his years. His chest was caved in slightly, and his shoulders drooped the way a farmer's hoe bends after too many seasons of stubborn soil. His hair, once thick, had thinned into uneven patches that the sun roasted daily. People often said, Musa walks as though the world is seated on his back. They weren't wrong. He moved slowly, each step a testimony that life had not been fair. Yet, in his wrinkled face, his eyes carried a boldness that confused many. He never hid his poverty. Instead, he displayed it like a traditional title. It was as if he wanted everyone to know, I am poor and I am proud. Musa's home was a single mud-walled room, its surface cracked like old firewood. The roof above his head was a patchwork of rusted zinc, tied down with stones to stop the wind from carrying it away. When the rains came, the roof beat like talking drums, and instead of cursing, Musa would say with a smile, even kings don't get free music from their ceiling. His bed was nothing more than raffia mats, spread thinly on bare floor. And the only chair in the room, a plastic one with a broken leg, was introduced to visitors as foreign import, though everyone knew it was rescued from the village dump. To outsiders, his life looked like suffering. But Musa had made poverty his friend, almost his bride. He was convinced that chasing money was chasing death. For him, wealth was a snake hiding in tall grass, shiny on the outside, but poisonous when you got too close. His philosophy was simple. Poverty keeps a man safe. This thinking was not new. It had been planted in him as a boy. His father, a millet farmer, used to say, the man with only one wrapper sleeps better than the one with a whole wardrobe. His mother, a woman who believed big dreams were dangerous, always warned, when money enters a house, peace runs out through the window. Those words, repeated year after year, grew inside Musa until they shaped the man he became. Even school could not shake him. While his classmates dreamed of becoming doctors, engineers, or civil servants, Musa was the boy at the back of the classroom saying, all these your big plans will only carry you to early grave. When his mates left for university or apprenticeship in the city, Musa remained in the village, following his father to the farm, carrying baskets of groundnuts, and doing errands for elders. In his heart, he believed he was wiser than them all. As he grew older, he turned his belief into a sermon. Every evening, when the day's work was done and the village quieted down, Musa would sit under the pawpaw tree beside Mama Zainab's shop. With a sachet of burukatu, or cheap gin in hand, he became the self-appointed preacher of poverty. Men, tired from hoeing the fields, would gather around him, and even women, buying groundnuts, would linger to hear his words. He spoke with the authority of someone who thought lack was a blessing. "Look at me, my people," he would say, raising his drink as though it were communion. "I don't fear thieves. Who wants to steal my torn slippers? I don't fear poison. What do I even have that someone wants to kill me for? Poverty is freedom. Poverty is peace." Those listening often nodded, not because they fully believed him, but because his confidence made suffering sound holy. The young ones called him Mai Talauchi Sarkin, king of the poor. His words were coded in proverbs. The goat that eats yam will always run from the owner's whip, but the goat with empty stomach sleeps well. It was lines like these that made him sound like a sage. His circle of loyal listeners included Chidi, the carpenter whose hammer worked slower than his mouth, Emeka, a yam farmer who harvested more stories than tubers, and Ngozi, the trader woman who often challenged Musa but still came every evening for his lectures. Together, they became known in whispers as the Paw Paw Parliament, a group of broke philosophers nodding to each other's misery. Not everyone bought Musa's message, though. Occasionally, a young hustler passing by would say, "But Musa, money solves problems." Musa would laugh and reply, "Solve problems? My brother, money creates the problems you are running from." The crowd would burst into laughter, and the challenger would leave, defeated not by truth, but by Musa's sharp tongue. Musa was also a self-appointed inspector of success. If someone bought a new goat, he would narrow his eyes and say, "Be careful, goat today, coffin tomorrow." If Funke, the widow, managed to sell more beans than usual in the market, Musa would mutter, "Too much profit can spoil destiny." He turned every village tragedy into a warning against wealth. His pawpaw tree gatherings became a sort of nightly ritual. He spoke as though poverty had chosen him as its ambassador. His voice carried conviction, and his audience, weary from their own struggles, found comfort in his reasoning. After all, it was easier to believe that being broke was holy than to admit they were trapped by hardship. People sometimes joked that if Nigeria held an election for Ambassador of Poverty, Musa would win unopposed. He carried his suffering like Agbada with dignity. But here's the truth no one told him. Poverty is like a silent snake. It coils around a man slowly until one day it squeezes his throat. For all his bold talk under the pawpaw tree, Musa had never faced the kind of storm that would test his gospel. And storms have a way of visiting uninvited. One was already on its way to Musa's life. It would not come gently. It would tear open his beliefs, scatter his pawpaw parliament, and force him to answer the question he had mocked others for asking. Is poverty truly peace? Or is it just silent suffering dressed as pride? Every evening in Kano village, when the sun dropped behind the baobab trees and the goats returned home with dust on their backs, Musa held his own kind of meeting. It wasn't written in any book, nor was it summoned by any chief, but the whole village knew that once Musa settled under the pawpaw tree near Mama Zainab's shop, the parliament had begun. The pawpaw tree was no ordinary spot. Its wide shade was the only free conference hall for miles. Farmers rested there after sweating in the fields, women balanced trays of akara to sell nearby, and restless children played 10-10 or sua in the sand. But when Musa arrived with his sachet gin, the atmosphere always shifted. He cleared his throat like a man about to address a crowd, leaned back in his broken chair, and began his sermon. "Mba, my people," Musa would say, voice strong despite his frail body. "Poverty na good cloth. It never goes out of fashion. When you wear it, nobody drags it with you." His followers, tired laborers, and traders with calloused hands, would laugh and nod. Chidi, the carpenter whose workshop was louder with gossip than hammering, was always the first to echo, "You're right, Musa. Poverty is peace." Emeka, the farmer with yam barns as empty as his pockets, would slap his thigh in agreement. Even Ngozi, the market woman who liked to argue, would mutter, "This your mouth, Musa. It can sweet like honey and bitter, like cola at the same time." Musa loved this attention. In his heart, he believed he was not just speaking for himself, but for every poor man in Nigeria. He had crowned himself ambassador of the poor, and his pawpaw parliament was his kingdom. He never lacked stories to prove his point. If he heard that a man in Lagos bought a new car, Musa would say, "Wait, that man go soon enter trouble. Car today, coffin tomorrow." The crowd would gasp and nod, even if they didn't believe him completely. If he heard that a neighbor's daughter had opened a small shop, Musa would warn, "One day, her enemies will use her own money to blind her." It was not just talk. Musa truly believed these things. To him, wealth was like carrying fire in a paper bag. It might shine for a while, but soon it would burn the carrier. Poverty, on the other hand, was cold water. It quenched desires and made a man sleep peacefully, even if his belly groaned from hunger. But not everyone agreed. Sometimes strangers passing through the village stopped to challenge him. A young man once said boldly, "But Musa, money sends children to school, money buys medicine, money builds house." Musa had looked at him the way a hawk studies a chick. "Young man," he replied, "money also buries people faster. Ask those who run after it like goats chasing cassava leaves. They always end in disgrace." The crowd had laughed, the stranger had walked away, and Musa felt victorious again. The parliament often stretched late into the night. Under the dim glow of Mama Zainab's kerosene lamp, Musa would raise his sachet drink like a holy relic and continue, "Tell me, my brothers, who kidnaps a poor man? Who poisons a poor man? Nobody. But rich men, every day they are looking over their shoulder. Poverty is protection. Wealth is trap. It was lines like these that made him untouchable in the eyes of his followers. For them, Musa was a prophet of suffering, turning their empty pockets into crowns. Yet even as he spoke, cracks began to show in his logic. Funke, the widow, sometimes challenged him. "Musa, I hear your talk, but tell me, when my child is sick, can poverty buy medicine? When rain enters this my leaking roof, can poverty patch it?" Her voice always carried pain. Musa would shift uncomfortably, but quickly recover. "Sister Funke," he would say, "at least your poverty will not allow thieves to enter your house. They will pass your door and go to rich man's compound. Is that not protection?" The crowd would laugh, but Funke's question always hung heavy in the air. Deep down, some wondered if Musa's gospel was truly wisdom, or just stubborn pride dressed as philosophy. Still, Musa remained firm. He loved the respect, the way people gathered to hear him, the way children whispered his name. In a place where hunger humiliated men daily, Musa found a way to turn shame into applause. That alone was enough to keep him going. One evening, as the Harmattan wind blew dust into the village, Musa held one of his most fiery parliaments yet. He raised his voice above the whistling wind. "My people, let me tell you, the man who sleeps on empty stomach may snore like thunder, but he sleeps in peace. The man who sleeps on mattress in Lekki estate cannot close his eyes for 2 hours. Spirit will chase him. Enemies will disturb him. Poverty is the true bodyguard of a man." The laughter and applause were thunderous. Chidi shouted, "Ambassador, give us more wisdom." Ngozi clapped her hands and said, "Musa, you talk as if you swallowed dictionary of suffering." But behind their laughter, doubts lingered. Some of them knew their children had dropped out of school because of poverty. Some knew their wives had died from childbirth because no money was available for hospital care. Yet Musa's confidence was intoxicating. It made their hardship feel like a noble badge. It was this dual reality, pain hidden under applause, that kept the parliament alive. They wanted to believe Musa. They needed to, because believing poverty was holy made their lives easier to bear. Still, not all were convinced. A boy named Hassan, fresh from the city, once interrupted Musa's sermon. He had just returned from Lagos, where he worked as an apprentice mechanic. With boldness, he asked, "Uncle Musa, but if poverty is good, why do all the children of this village run away to the city? Why not stay here and enjoy the peace of poverty?" The crowd fell silent. All eyes turned to Musa. For the first time in many evenings, his tongue hesitated, but then he recovered with a smile. "Young man, they will run, but they will return. Riches are like sugarcane, sweet in the mouth, but when it finishes, you will be left with stick. They will all come back with nothing." The crowd clapped again, but Hassan shook his head and muttered, "Na story." He walked away, leaving Musa's words hanging in the air. That night, as Musa lay on his raffia mat, listening to the zinc roof sing under the cold wind, he felt a flicker of something he didn't like. Doubt. Hassan's question replayed in his mind. Why indeed were the young ones running to the city? Why was the village emptying of ambition if poverty was such a blessing? Musa shook his head violently, as if to drive the thought away. "No," he muttered, "poverty is peace. Wealth is curse." But life has a way of answering questions you refuse to face. Musa's parliament was about to meet its greatest test, not in the comfort of Pawpaw's shade, but in the harsh reality of a crisis that would not bend to his philosophy. For all his boasting, Musa was yet to face a moment when poverty would cost him more than pride. That moment was coming, like Harmattan dust slowly gathering before a storm. The dry season had settled fully in Kano village. Dust carried by Harmattan coated every rooftop like ash after fire. Children's lips cracked white, and goats coughed in the heat. Life carried on as usual until one fateful afternoon when Musa's philosophy was dragged into the open and beaten like stolen yam. It started with a shout. "Musa! Musa! Come quick!" The voice was from Amarachi, his niece, a girl of barely 10. She came running barefoot, her wrapper loose, tears streaking her cheeks. Musa, who had been napping on his raffia mat, jumped up so quickly that his fragile chair collapsed beneath him. "What is it?" he barked, heart thumping. "It's Mama! She collapsed on the farm! She know they wake up!" The word slammed into Musa's chest. His mother, old Madam Hawa, had been his rock since childhood. A tough woman, she had raised him and his siblings with iron hands. If she ever complained of a headache, others knew it was no ordinary pain. For her to collapse, it meant danger. Musa dashed out of his room barefoot, dust flying as he ran toward the family's small plot at the edge of the village. His mind raced. He wanted to deny the fear, but the truth gnawed at him. Poverty, his beloved companion, had no answers for fainting spells. When he arrived, a small crowd had already gathered. Hawa lay on the ground, chest rising faintly, her body trembling as though fighting unseen spirits. Neighbors fanned her with old wrappers. Some muttered advice. Bring water. Rub palm oil on her chest. Hold her feet up. Musa fell to his knees beside her. Mama, Mama. His voice cracked. Her eyes fluttered but did not open. Sweat drenched her headscarf. An elder, Baba Ibrahim, shook his head slowly. This no be ordinary fainting. She needs doctor. The word doctor hit Musa like a whip. Doctor meant money. Doctor meant hospital. Doctor meant a bill his pocket had never even imagined. His whole life, Musa had mocked money. But now, with his mother gasping for breath, all his sermons about peace of poverty began to sound like foolish noise. Still, pride made him stall. He asked the crowd, "Can't we try herbs? Hot water with ginger? At least let's boil some neem leaves." Ngozi, the sharp-tongued trader, spat on the ground. "Musa, stop deceiving yourself. This woman will die here if you delay. She needs clinic, not pawpaw tree grammar." Musa looked around desperately. The villagers' eyes were on him, waiting for him to act. For years he had preached that poverty was protection. But at that moment poverty looked like a wicked thief robbing him of his own mother. With trembling hands he carried her with the help of Chidi and Amika. They placed her on a wooden cart and pulled it toward the only clinic in the area, a small building painted with peeling blue paint. The journey felt endless. Musa's heart pounded with each bump of the road. At the clinic's front desk, a nurse with tired eyes barely looked at them before asking, "Deposit?" "How much?" Musa asked, his voice almost a whisper. 50,000 naira. Musa staggered as though slapped. 50,000? He barely had 2,500 hidden in an old milk tin under his bed. That money was meant for cheap gin and maybe groundnuts. 50,000 was a mountain he could never climb. "Nurse, please," Musa begged. "I have 2,500 now. Let me pay balance later." The nurse's eyes hardened. "We don't treat credit. No money, no bed." Musa turned pale. The crowd behind him shuffled awkwardly. Even Chidi, his loyal parliament member, looked away in shame. The weight of his own words returned to choke him. Poverty is peace. Poverty is protection. Yet here, poverty was no shield. It was a chain, holding his mother hostage at death's door. He fell on his knees. "Please, I beg you, this is my mother. Save her first." The nurse simply called the next patient. Musa dragged himself outside and sat on the clinic's cement step, face buried in his palms. For the first time in years, the ambassador of poverty had no words. The parliament under the pawpaw tree couldn't save him. Proverbs couldn't heal his mother. His pride felt like dry leaf burning in fire. As he sat there, tears rolling down his cheeks, one name kept pounding in his head: Emeka, his childhood friend who had left Kano years ago for Lagos. Emeka was now known across the region for his small but growing business empire. He had once returned to the village with a brand new Toyota and gifts for children. Musa had mocked him then, saying, "Car today, grave tomorrow." But today, Musa's heart whispered differently. What if Emeka is the only rope between Mama and the grave? The thought made him tremble. To beg Emeka for money would mean resigning as the ambassador of poverty. His pawpaw parliament would laugh until their ribs cracked. Yet, what was laughter compared to his mother's life? That night, Musa couldn't sleep. His zinc roof sang under the Harmattan breeze. But instead of the music he once boasted about, it now sounded like mockery. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to his mother's faint groans from where she lay beside him, untreated. His proverbs tasted like dust in his mouth. His philosophy of lack felt like chains around his throat. At dawn, he rose, dressed in his only decent caftan, and began the long walk to Emeka's compound. The journey felt like marching to war. His legs trembled with each step, not from hunger, but from the weight of pride breaking inside him. He could already hear the Pawpaw Parliament mocking, "Our ambassador has defected. Our prophet of poverty has joined the rich." When he reached Emeka's gate, he stopped. The iron bars alone looked richer than his entire existence. He almost turned back, but then he thought of his mother's weak breathing, her lips whispering prayers in pain. With a deep breath, Musa knocked. A young guard opened. "Who you want see?" "Musa, tell your Oga it's Musa." Moments later, Emeka himself appeared, dressed in a spotless white agbada, wristwatch gleaming. His face broke into a wide smile. "Musa, my brother, after all these years, you finally came." Musa's lips trembled. He wanted to lie, to pretend he came for casual visit, but the truth spilled like water from a broken calabash. "Emeka, Mama dey die. Clinic want 50,000 before they touch her. I have nothing. Please, help me." Silence. Musa braced for mockery, for a lecture, for humiliation. But Emeka only sighed, went inside, and returned with a neat brown envelope. He placed it gently into Musa's trembling hands. "Here, take it. No need to pay back. Save Mama." Musa stood frozen, tears spilling freely. His chest burned with shame. For years he had mocked men like Emeka. For years he had called wealth a curse. Yet today, wealth had stretched its hand to save the only person he loved most. As he stumbled back toward the clinic, clutching the envelope, one bitter truth kept ringing in his ears. Poverty had betrayed him. When Musa returned from the clinic after his mother's treatment had begun, he expected quiet. He thought he could slip back into his one-room house unnoticed. But Kano village had ears sharper than drums. Before the sun set, gossip had spread faster than Harmattan fire. By evening, the Pawpaw Parliament, the very court where Musa had once ruled, was buzzing like a disturbed beehive. Chidi, the carpenter, was the first to announce it, voice loud as though preaching in a crusade. "My people, have you heard? Our honorable poverty ambassador went to beg Emeka for money." His words flew around like arrows. Men laughed so hard their stomachs shook. Women buying pepper clapped their hands in disbelief. Even children chasing goats through the dust sang songs. "Musa, Musa, money don catch you." That night, when Musa walked past the pawpaw tree on his way home, he felt the heat of eyes burning into his back. The parliament that once crowned him king now looked at him as a fallen idol. Emeka's gift of 50,000 naira had not just bought treatment for his mother, it had sold out Musa's philosophy. The next evening he gathered courage to sit under the pawpaw tree as usual. He arrived with his sachet drink, cleared his throat, and tried to start his sermon. "My people, as I was saying before," but Chidi cut him short with a smirk. Ah, Musa. Which people are you still addressing? You that collected money from Emeka? You that said riches are poison? But now you drink from the cup?" Laughter exploded under the pawpaw tree. Musa's face burned, but he tried to stand firm. "That was emergency. I did not sell my belief. It was just—" Ngozi clapped her hands dramatically. "Emergency? Musa, so poverty could not rescue your mama? All your plenty talk. Yet when death knocked, you ran to the same wealth you used to insult. If poverty was your shield, why did you drop it?" The crowd roared again. Musa's mouth went dry. For the first time since the parliament began years ago, no one nodded at his words. No one echoed his proverbs. Instead, they laughed, hissed, and shook their heads. His throne under the pawpaw tree was gone. Even Emeka, standing quietly nearby, could not hide his smile. He had not intended to humiliate Musa, but the irony was too rich for silence. He walked closer and spoke softly. "Musa, you see now, poverty is not peace. Poverty is prison. You have carried it like a crown, but today it nearly buried your own mother." Musa clenched his fists. He wanted to shout back, but his voice betrayed him. His chest felt heavy with shame. The villager stared, waiting for a witty proverb, a sharp reply, anything that could restore his lost pride. But Musa had none. For the first time, the ambassador of poverty sat silent, his tongue as dry as the dust under his slippers. Word spread beyond Kano. In nearby villages, Musa's story was told like a cautionary tale. Traders at the market mocked, "This is the man who preached poverty, yet ran to wealth for rescue." Farmers in distant fields laughed as they weeded their crops. "Ambassador Musa has been impeached." Within days, the parliament under the pawpaw tree thinned out. Chidi now spent his evenings at Emeka's compound, fixing broken furniture for free food. Ngozi, once Musa's sparring partner, began selling akara by Emeka's gate, hoping for better customers. Emeka had become the new chief of the people, not by proverbs, but by practical action. He had fixed the village borehole, bought school uniforms for children, and even promised to renovate the clinic that saved Musa's mother. One evening, when Musa tried to gather the parliament again, only 2 old men appeared, both too deaf to follow the mockery. They nodded at his words out of habit, not conviction. It felt like a funeral for his reputation. Musa realized the depth of his fall when even children began to taunt him. As he walked to the stream one morning, a group of boys sang in chorus, "Poverty King Don beg, Poverty King Don beg, him mama nearly die, Emeka come rescue." Their high-pitched laughter stabbed deeper than adult mockery. Musa turned away quickly, his chest heavy. That night, alone on his raffia mat, he wrestled with his pride. He whispered to himself, "Poverty is peace. Poverty is peace." But the words felt hollow, like drums without skin. The image of his mother's faint body haunted him. The sound of villagers' laughter echoed in his head. He had always thought poverty gave him freedom, yet it had shackled him to shame. Still, Musa was stubborn. He told himself that his fall was temporary. He believed the villagers were simply dazzled by Emeka's money, but soon they would see the dangers of wealth again. Yet, deep inside, a quiet voice kept gnawing, "What if I was wrong all along?" The next day, he tried to preach again. He sat under the pawpaw tree, raised his sachet gin, and began, "My people, hear me. Riches may shine today, but tomorrow they burn." Before he could finish, Funka the widow shouted from across the road, "Abeg Musa, leave matter. If not for Emeka's money, your mama would be under the ground by now. Respect yourself." The crowd burst into another round of laughter. Musa swallowed his shame and stood up quietly. He walked away, leaving the pawpaw tree behind. His identity, carefully built for years, had crumbled like old mud walls in the rain. The ambassador of poverty had lost his office. The villagers had stripped him of his crown, not by vote, but by laughter. Yet, even in disgrace, Musa remained stubborn. In his heart, he still whispered that poverty was peace. But reality had slapped him hard, and the marks would not fade quickly. His philosophy was no longer admired. It was a joke. His parliament had been dissolved. And as he lay in his dark room that night, his stomach empty, his slippers worn out, and his mother still recovering, Musa realized one painful truth. Poverty does not protect, it exposes. But could he accept this? That was the battle raging inside him. Musa had always thought he was untouchable. For years his tongue was sharp, his confidence unshaken, and his pawpaw parliament always at his feet. But now he walked through Kano village like a shadow of himself. No one stopped to greet him. The children who once called him Odogu Talaka now mocked him with songs. Even his closest disciples had crossed over to Emeka's side, drinking from the well of wealth that Musa had mocked for decades. At night, he lay awake on his raffia mat, staring at his patched zinc roof. What once sounded like music now mocked him with every rattle of the wind. The thought he tried hardest to bury always returned. What if I was wrong all along? His mother was slowly recovering, thanks to Emeka's money. She often held his hand and whispered, "My son, stubbornness cannot cook soup. Pride cannot pay bills. Look at how God used Emeka to save me." Each time she said it, Musa's chest tightened. He wanted to argue, to defend his crown as poverty ambassador, but the truth had already pierced too deep. Days turned into weeks, and Musa avoided the pawpaw tree. He could not sit there any more. That ground, once his throne, had become his courtroom of shame. Yet, the villagers did not forget him. At the market, whispers followed him. See Musa, the man who preached poverty but begged for money, in fact. On the farm path, laughter trailed him like hungry dogs. He was no longer the ambassador. He was the example of failure. One morning, after fetching water, he saw Emeka at the borehole he had built. Children splashed and laughed around it, their faces clean for once. Women filled their buckets without fear of walking miles to the stream. Emeka stood watching, smiling, his agbada glowing in the sun. Musa froze. A lump rose in his throat. This was the man he had once called cursed, a ritualist, a thief. Yet here he was, blessing the village in ways poverty never could. Emeka noticed him and walked over. Musa, my brother, he said warmly, you look troubled. Musa avoided his eyes. Trouble is a poor man's inheritance, he muttered. But Emeka shook his head. No, Musa, trouble is the inheritance of pride. You carried poverty like crown, but it nearly buried your mother. How long will you deceive yourself? The words struck Musa like hammer on dry ground. For the first time, he did not argue. He only nodded slowly and walked away, his heart heavy. That night, Musa made a decision. He would return to the pawpaw tree, not to defend his philosophy, but to confront it. He owed the people, and he owed himself. The next evening he arrived early. He dragged his cracked plastic chair under the pawpaw tree and sat quietly. Slowly, villagers began to gather. Curiosity pulled them. What would Musa say now? Chidi came with his hammer still tied to his waist. Ngozi arrived with a tray of akara, her eyes sharp as ever. Even children crowded around, eager to see if their former ambassador still had words. Musa stood, his voice low at first, but steady. My people, for many years I told you that poverty is peace. I said wealth is a curse. You listened, you nodded, you believed me, but I was wrong. The crowd gasped. Chidi blinked. Ngozi folded her arms. Musa continued, I wore poverty like Agbada. I paraded it like chieftaincy title. But when my mother collapsed, poverty could not save her. Poverty could not pay for medicine. Poverty could not give us hope. If not for Emeka, he paused, swallowing hard. If not for the wealth I mocked, my mother would be buried by now. Silence swept the crowd. Even the children stopped fidgeting. Musa's voice grew stronger. I thought poverty gave peace of mind, but it only gives silence. The silence of hunger, the silence of shame, the silence of helplessness. I told you riches kill, but I forgot that poverty kills quietly too. It kills dreams, it kills joy, it kills the people we love. Ngozi, unable to resist, shouted, So Musa, you are finally resigning from your office? Laughter rippled, but Musa raised his hand. Yes, today I resign. I am no longer the ambassador of poverty. That office has expired. The crowd roared. Some laughed, some clapped, some simply stared in shock. Musa had never spoken like this. He sat back down, sweat glistening on his forehead. For the first time in his life, he felt lighter. The burden of defending poverty had left him. His pride had cracked, but in its place, truth was sprouting like new yam shoots after rain. Emeka, who had been watching from the side, nodded approvingly. Later that night, he visited Musa's hut. He placed a small brown envelope on the raffia mat. Musa, he said, I know you. You are not lazy. You only let pride deceive you. Come work with me in Abuja. It is not ritual. It is not evil. It is honest work. You will earn, you will eat, and you will help your people better than with proverbs. Musa hesitated, staring at the envelope. His mind wrestled. One part of him still clung to the old pride, the comfort of being different. But another part, tired, wounded, and humbled, knew the truth. Poverty had betrayed him, and pride had almost buried his mother. He looked up at Emeka, tears filling his eyes. I will come, he whispered. Emeka smiled. Then, brother, your new life begins. The next morning, the villagers gathered again under the pawpaw tree. But this time, Musa was not there to preach. He was packing his few belongings, raffia mat, broken chair, and his mother's cooking pot. Children watched curiously as he tied them into a sack. When Ngozi passed, she teased, "Ambassador, are you running away?" Musa chuckled, the first true laugh in years. "No, Ngozi, I am retiring from service. Poverty has lost its only ambassador." By noon, Musa and Emeka left for Abuja. As they rode away, the villagers murmured, some with envy, some with admiration. For the first time, Musa did not feel mocked. He felt free. That night, as the pawpaw tree stood empty, the villagers agreed on one thing. Poverty had finally lost its preacher. And in the silence, one lesson echoed through Kano village like the sound of drums after festival. Poverty is not peace. Poverty is prison. And even the greatest ambassador cannot defend a prison forever. Life has a way of humbling even the strongest philosophies. Musa wore poverty like a crown, boasting that it gave him peace. But when reality tested him, that same poverty betrayed him. His story is a reminder that pride, when misplaced, can blind us from the truth. In our daily lives, how many times do we cling to habits, beliefs, or excuses simply because they feel comfortable, even though they keep us trapped? Musa's journey shows us that survival needs more than proverbs. It needs courage to change, humility to learn, and wisdom to embrace opportunities. Poverty may disguise itself as peace, but in truth, it is silent suffering. The question for each of us is simple. Are we like Musa before his awakening, clinging to pride, or are we willing to open our eyes and step into better possibilities? Thank you for following this story. If you enjoyed it and learned something, don't leave without subscribing. Hit that subscribe button now so you never miss another powerful story here on the channel.